Good stuff. Hi Mandy.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for welcoming me back into the nursery. This is where my daughter came during her early years. I'm one of the parent governors here as well, and we're going to have a conversation about your time working in early years education across East London, which I think you told me is over 30 years, 1992, is that right?
That's when I graduated and joined the teaching pool in Waltham Forest.
In Waltham Forest.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so it's not been just in Stratford, it's been all across East London, is that right?
Well, mainly Waltham Forest and Newham.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we start from there then? Was that something you always wanted to do, or?
No. I wanted to do many things in life. I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be an architect. And unfortunately, I wasn't given great career advice by my secondary school. I was told that I could probably get a job in Sainsbury's. Not very aspirational.
No.
But I'm that kind of person that is a bit determined. So I'm happy to try lots of things, but I knew that that wasn't kind of the career path that I wanted. I love science, so I was always interested in just experiments and exploring, and I went to work for ICI.
ICI being
the chemical company.
Okay, yeah.
On a year's placement. Decided that wasn't for me. I didn't like the fact that everybody in the labs would do all of the hard work and all of the professors would just take the credit for the research. I didn't like that. So I decided that I would be a teacher.
Awesome. There's two things I've picked up there. One is, that aspiration of, even though someone had said something, you kind of want to do your own thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about recognition, and maybe was that because people weren't playing as a team, or you personally wanted to be recognised a little bit more?
I just feel that everybody has an inner potential, and that should be recognised, especially by teachers, because teachers have the capacity to kind of fuel that desire to learn. So do parents, but you have to recognise it in your child, and then you have to find a way to nurture that. So I feel that everybody has it. I feel that maybe society has other dreams for us, but we should always follow our dream.
Yeah. So, okay, you then found yourself as a teacher in Waltham Forest.
Yeah.
What was that like? And was that easy, first of all, getting into it? And did you feel like it was a natural thing to like do?
I love teaching. I love teaching in early years because you can be very, very creative. No day is the same. Children are amazing. They either like you or they don't like you. They're happy or they're sad, especially if they're very young. And you know, because they express themselves, so therefore you know how to help them. I don't know if I grew up thinking that I would be a teacher, but I think it's really nice to be able to pass on some form of knowledge to somebody else. They say that like language and music are the greatest gifts you can give for free. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's what teaching is all about. It's just about sharing what you know with other people.
Yeah. And specifically now in Waltham Forest, were there dimensions of that you felt, actually this is a really interesting part of the world that I'm in, and so I feel well placed to do that? Because I don't think you are from East London originally.
No, originally I grew up in Islington.
Okay.
So that's central London, and some of my childhood was spent in Barbados. So yeah.
Okay.
I've got kind of a really rich amazing cultural heritage
Amazing.
that I'm very lucky to have.
Yeah. And was there something particularly then about Waltham Forest and Newham that was, you wanted to teach in those places, or it was just a bit of a quirk of fate that you were doing?
I studied at the Polytechnic of East London, so I would travel to Stratford from Islington, so I became very familiar with the area. So we're talking like late 80s, early 90s. Again, a lot of untapped potential. There was no Olympic Park. At that time, I don't even think there was a vision for the Olympic Park.
No, it's just Hackney Marshes and wasteland. Yeah.
But East London was full of character and, like, again, aspiration.
Yeah, which you had felt when you were younger, someone hadn't been there for you in some way.
Yeah.
So perhaps that was fueling you to want to correct that for others, or be a more ambitious voice for other young children.
Maybe subconsciously, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so maybe fast forward a little bit then from Waltham Forest to different parts of Newham. Again, it's your teaching at the education at Polytechnic, and then other things and the community that are keeping you in East London.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that kind of kept you there, or that you felt, this is where I want to be teaching?
Well, when I think about, I've always been well supported in the schools that I've worked in. I've always had a connection with the families, because again, teaching is not just about being in the classroom teaching a child. It's about educating the parents, it's about forming relationships, it's about finding out about the environment, giving people opportunities to go outside of the locale where they live. It's really important, again, to not to limit people. So by working in East London, I was able to kind of share. Again, it's about sharing. If I'd been to visit a museum, in fact, I do remember on one occasion, on a Saturday, we took parents and children to the Natural History Museum.
And what was so special about that you still remember that?
Because it was a great fun experience. We couldn't fit it in during the week, so we decided, okay, we'll just meet up on Saturday and we'll go.
Yeah.
And off we went.
And is that so that's a challenge, I suppose. And correct me if I'm wrong. Do you see that in other localities? Perhaps Buckinghamshire, for example, would they have that kind of problem, or is that something that's quite unique to this part of the world?
I think we're very lucky to be living in East London, but from this location you can get to anywhere in the country. It's great, but it's not just about going further afield. It's like jumping on the bus and going into central London, or taking the C2C train to Leigh-on-Sea. All of these things we do for our children and families at Rebecca Cheetham because they're accessible. But maybe some schools are a little bit reserved about taking that calculated risk. But it's really important to give people opportunity. And some of our families would never know how to get to the seaside if staff in school didn't think that would be a great learning opportunity. Let's do it, let's make it happen.
Yeah, and talking about some of the challenges or the things that parents are or aren't aware about, again, because of the kind of population we have here in Newham, are there challenges you've seen that you just wouldn't experience anywhere else, particularly with English maybe as a second or third language, perhaps with disposable income and how that affects the kids? Are those the kind of, do you see those kind of challenges?
Yeah, but we try to overcome them again by, it's no different to teaching a class of children. Parents have different stages of development and ability. So it's about if you want to share a piece of knowledge and somebody is not able to, let's say, read that piece of knowledge, then you show them, you demonstrate it to them. If they're not able to afford it, then you find a way to make it affordable. For example, book week. So World Book Day, everybody come dressed up as a favourite book character. We provided materials so that parents didn't feel obliged to have to go and pay for a costume, so that they could be included in that celebration, not excluded. It's just about finding the right way to share the practice with everybody.
And do you find it's easier being able to relate to parents because most of the other teaching staff as well are from the area, or do you think it doesn't matter and it's actually good to have a mix of people in and out, or you should have one type, or you should bias towards one type?
I'm not biased towards one type. I think it's great to have a mixture of people who have a range of skill and ability and have a range of different experiences to share.
Awesome.
Otherwise, you are in danger of becoming blinkered, and that's not great.
No. Okay, moving on a little bit. As a parent governor, I've been quite close to the curriculum here. And I mean, obviously, I've only got the two children. I was a governor of another primary school, but for early years nursery, you know, in conversation with you over the years, you've struck me as someone quite progressive, and you're thinking about what kids should be exposed to and how they should be taught and etc. That doesn't strike me as a typical thing across other nurseries or schools. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, but I think the constraints might be budget, might be staffing levels, time for self-development, and also opportunities. I've been very fortunate in being presented with opportunity to develop my early years pedagogy. The Frobel Trust professional development course, which I did, I think, 2 years ago, really highlighted the importance of the individual, and again, finding that inner spark within a child and nurturing them. And I really love the idea that we're all different and we've all got something new to offer. I don't like the idea that education is becoming maths and literacy and science, and that the arts are being eroded. I'm not in favour of that. I think it will be wonderful if somebody wants to be a dancer or a musician, then they should be allowed to do that and develop that, whether they can afford it or not. It is maybe the idealistic view of a school, but it's the school's responsibility to get that instrument for that child if they need it.
Yeah.
And to provide those lessons. But I feel that sometimes the curriculum is being squeezed and all the good bits are being squeezed out.
And where does that pressure come from? Is it the likes of regulators like Ofsted, or the parents that want, you know, harder, higher marks for their kids?
I'm not sure how to answer that without being controversial. I think it's just society as a whole. And actually I was thinking about jobs for the future earlier this week. Maybe the curriculum is being tailored because, you know, in the future, the jobs for people might be of a certain type. And here I'm thinking about computer-based coding. But there's always room for somebody to sing or paint, build, create. It doesn't have to be one type of learning, and I feel we're in danger of that happening.
Do you feel there's ever any pressure to be wary of the future we're creating here? Because yeah, it strikes me there's an opportunity. I mean, it's so rich, it's so you know, the kids are impressionable, and there's people could argue there's dynamics of social engineering possible in what you teach and in the kind of society that you produce.
Yeah.
Is that pressure palpable, or actually it's not that deep and people overthink it sometimes?
I think only time will tell. But I'm going to do my utmost to make sure that there are other opportunities alongside what we have been asked to teach.
Yeah.
So not to dismiss what we've been told, that's fine. But, you know, just to maybe give a different spin on it. Maybe to say to children and parents, that's great, have you thought about this?
Yeah, and I mean, from those of us on the trustee board and school governors board and the head teacher and everything else, it feels like you've got the support to be able to do that.
Yes.
Again, I've not been across many nurseries in your is that something you think is quite special here, or there's a movement growing across of people thinking like that?
I think Rebecca Cheetham is a very magical place. I say that all the time. But there are other schools that we work with, because you know, like-minded people tend to gravitate towards each other. There are other schools that we work with, other private, voluntary and independent nurseries that we work with that have similar viewpoints. And again, that's where the sharing of practice takes place.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's been a really interesting conversation and a really interesting insight into your time, 30 odd years of teaching across East London. Any last thoughts about life and experience of teaching early years in East London?
Well, just one statement. If you're going to teach in early years, it's amazing.
Cool, that's a really great advert and a great place to end. Thank you very much, Mandy.
You're welcome, thank you.
Afternoon, Rohan. Thank you for making time for me to have a conversation with you.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Amazing, amazing. Before we get into it, if you just introduce yourself, please.
So, my name is Rohan Allen. I'm the head teacher here at Rebecca Cheetham Nursery and Children's Centre, and I have been for the last 10 years.
Amazing. And we know each other because my daughter used to come here,
That's
and I am a parent governor.
Yep.
So we know each other in a semi-formal relationship as
That's
well.
right, yeah.
So yeah, the EastEnders Effect video podcast I've been doing since the start of the year, talking to friends, family, people across East London, across West Ham, Stratford. Just, getting into the stories and lives of people. Also in a semi-formal capacity as well, just understanding vision for places like this that are places of education for children. So tell us a little bit about your journey here into East London, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
So, you might tell from my accent that I'm not British born. So I'm actually of Australian and Maltese descent. So I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and I moved here for a holiday when I was, let's not say the age, but many years ago, 18 years ago actually. And I don't know, I was always kind of really drawn to East London. It's kind of like a bit more hip, things are happening, you know, where the trends are being set, so it kind of feels like it's all happening in East London. But I came for a holiday and, you know...
Just never left.
London's a great base to be able to kind of travel around, you know, Europe. I didn't see enough in the first couple of years, and I just kept extending, and then, you know, family happens, and you kind of you start to build some roots.
Amazing.
So those roots are in East London.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's been all of those 18 years ago, or different parts of East
London?
London?
No, different. Well. Initially, like, you know, West End. You know, I lived in Soho when I first came here because I didn't know anywhere else, so that was the only place I knew. But then, kind of gradually, like, you know, Canary Wharf, you know, Isle of Dogs, Cross Harbour, and I probably spent the most time in Leighton, so in East London.
Cool.
Yep.
And what brought you then into education, or had you always been in education?
I've done a number of things in my life. I was a supermarket manager, a swimming teacher. I worked in proofreading for a little while. And then I, eventually, I always knew I wanted to teach. So I did a teaching degree, secondary English. Did that for 7 years back home. And then I came here, I was teaching again secondary for a couple of years. And then I felt like I was just working all the time. So I wanted to take a break, but then I was told to try out reception. So I moved to primary school. So it was going from, GCSEs to 5-year-olds, and I had no idea what I was doing, to be perfectly honest. But the best advice I got was to just have fun, because I wasn't having fun. I was being a strict disciplinarian, because that was my secondary background, and that was the best advice. And everything changed, and I've loved early years ever since. So and I would say the majority of my professional career in the UK has been in East London, specifically Newham.
Cool. And now getting into some of the early years education and the difference, with later years, particularly around that kind of rigour of examination, etc. Could you just speak to some of that transition and what you found was different and what you enjoyed about that?
So I feel you can be a lot more creative. That's kind of without saying. I think I learnt a lot about the importance of play, and how I think most people just see play as kind of a throwaway thing. You can't really learn from it. But actually, what I learnt was that that's the basis for all learning. You kind of more adapt to take risks and to explore new things. And get things wrong. And actually, there's nothing wrong with getting things wrong. We learn from our mistakes. Whereas, the further you go up in school, especially when you think about exams, and sometimes you feel like you're just teaching to a test, and so the kind of passion, the imagination, kind of starts to go. I'm a real believer that we need to keep play alive for as many years as possible, because I think Einstein, I'm not going to phrase it I'm paraphrasing, but he wasn't the most intelligent person, but he felt he was the most imaginative, and and that's how he came up with all these new kind of theories. Whereas if you're just rote learning, you're never going to kind of go outside the box. So I think that element of play is just so pivotal to exploring new things and unlocking new potential.
And how is that with whatever the local authority and whatever the national curriculum is saying for early years training? Do you find a tension with that?
I think there's lots of government policy that says how important early years is. Unfortunately, that's not translated through funding or any kind of initiatives that really support early years. So I feel like since I've moved to this school, it's just been a constant fight year on year to make sure that we get funding, that the funding is sufficient to run the school, and that we don't disappear. There is year on year there are lots of maintained nursery schools which are closing, and actually I think we've worked really hard in Newham. We've maintained all 7. We've got 7 nursery schools. It's the biggest amount of nursery schools in the country. But I think we're really innovative, and we do a lot, not just for our own schools, but we I guess motto, for want of a better word, is that we want to make sure every single child that goes to a new early years setting is getting the best practice. So we work with private settings and teach, give them training in communication language, for example. Check the environment to make sure the environment is good, and that inspires good kind of play and learning from the children. And we also work with primary schools as well, and we run this I think it was the 6th or 7th year we run a early years conference, probably one of the biggest in the UK, and that just kind of was just to showcase all the fantastic stuff that happens in Newham nursery schools. So that's actually really exciting, because we do get some guest speakers in, to pull the crowds, but actually the workshops, which is kind of the heart of the conference, it is all the talent that exists in our schools. So that's a really exciting thing.
Amazing. And I don't know much about Rebecca Cheetham herself, but I just saw a portrait of her.
Yeah.
Do you know much about the history and there's some of that influence,
Yeah.
some of the progressiveness we see here in the nursery today?
So she was one of the leaders in bringing nursery schools to the forefront. There isn't much kind of known about her, so there's kind of just little snippets here and there. But she was amongst a few other significant women who made sure that children in East London were getting an opportunity to have a nursery education. So I guess that's why. The school was called Rebecca Chisholm. Yeah.
Going back a step now to what you saw about the funding challenges, do you find there's an extra challenge given the high rates of poverty within Newham anyway? And just speak a little bit about some of the challenges of
Newham is an interesting kind of place because especially where we are, which is in Stratford. I think probably got the highest rates of poverty, but then there is a lot of wealth here as well. We're close to Olympic Village. You've got you've got the extremes. So that comes through in the parents that come through the nursery as well. And their needs are very, very different. So it's about being able to tap into what all children need, and be able to support that. So I think you were talking about the funding. Luckily for us, we're able to kind of support the funding we offer daycare here as well. So that helps to make sure that we have the right kind of funding. But, because we have teachers on site, our ratios can go to 1 to 13, one adult to 13 children. But, we try to maintain a 1 adult to 8 children because we have such a big space and we feel like the children need more adult support, Probably the biggest issue facing children at the moment is speech and language. COVID really stopped children from being able to spend time with each other and be social beings and to experiment with language. So that's one of the biggest things we need to really work on, not just us but across all schools in early years, because children didn't get, and parents had their children at home while they were working. They didn't have the time to have these conversations with their children and help them to grow their language. So there is significant lack in children
and a lag in development which is still coming through some of the kids coming now. Other challenges that might be unique to East London here as well, particularly some of the kids from lower socio-economic families, multiple occupancy households. Do you see any other challenges, maybe some not coming on time, and that affects learning and abilities kind of?
I think we I hate to use the word strict, but we do encourage people to be on time. We do have something called protected time here, and that's where the adult is leading the learning. And it's just a short part of the day because we want to make sure children have an opportunity to play for the majority of it. But no one can, if you come late for that, you don't access it. You have to wait until that session's finished. And that actually, although people may grumble, I think it actually, we're preparing children for when they go to reception where it's an absolute necessity to be on time. So actually, and then I think it just respects the learning that takes place.
And keeps the focus as well, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the minute you open the door whilst the children are engaged, you lose them, they turn their heads, and that magic that's been created is gone.
I can only imagine what that's like. Yeah.
So I think the other big issue here is it's kind of phrased working poor. So people who are working, lots and lots of hours
on the breadline.
But because they're not entitled to funding, it might be because of their visa status or they're earning just over what the limit might be, but they're really struggling. High rents, and that's where you have you can sometimes have a family of 5 in a 1-bedroom apartment, and that's not ideal. So we're lucky here because we've got lots of outdoor space, heaps of outdoor space, and actually our children can play outside all day if they want to, in whatever kinds of weather, and actually that's really important for children who are in a really small apartment. Yeah,
I know, Kenya loved playing here, and the outdoor space really contributed. Thoughts about the curriculum again and the creativity and play that happens. Is there ever any challenge from parents who perhaps that is a new approach to early years learning and who might want a little bit more rigour, or do you find actually a lot of parents take to it and are happy with
Yes, I think sometimes it's about, we run workshops for parents every month, so we call them parent forums. So we'll talk about the curriculum, we'll talk about children. If we look at maths, for example, we really strip back our maths program. So it's about mastering numbers from 1 to 5, rather than a child could count to 100. It doesn't mean that they know what the number 23 means. Memorizing that is just showing 1 to 100. They can memory
recall.
Yeah. But we want to know that a child can say, right, show us what 5 looks like. Show us what 3 looks like. You can use your fingers. We'll say like this is 5, but this is 5. So the fiveness of 5. We call it. So it's about really knowing and understanding the numbers that lead up to there, because once they've got that grounding, then that will set them up for what's the 7 look like. And it's a lot of the practical ways that maths mastery that we think is really important. All our staff have had rigorous training, all our teachers have had rigorous training in that, and we're kind of making sure that comes through with the children as well.
I'm kind of wryly smiling because that makes a lot of sense now when I think of number blocks on the CPVs that she watches, and the 5ness of 5.
And I would encourage watching number blocks.
It's
I don't encourage watching too much TV, but number blocks is actually phenomenal.
It's
and my son watched it, religiously, and he learnt lots of mathematical concepts, from that program. I think it really helped his maths.
And so maybe zooming out a little bit now, the whole sector of education and that, embracing technology. Do you find it a challenge here? Are parents expecting kids